Now we would proceed with the next session, that is on public policy dilemmas of cybersecurity and privacy. This will help us gain some perspective on public policy making. And the moderator for this session is Mr. Raman Roy, Chairman and Managing Director, Quattro. And the other panelists are Professor M.V. Rajiv Gowda, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, and Mr. Arvind Gupta, Head IT Cell, BJP. Mr. Rajiv Gowda will be joining us in the next 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, folks. I don't know which mic to use. I'm mic'd twice over, and none of them are internet-linked mics. Yesterday, in the a little part that I heard, we spoke about the number of devices that are connected or interconnected or on the web, and by 2020 they will go to whatever 50 odd billion, and everything in our lives that we utilize, not just the mobile phone, our cars, our refrigerators, our electricity, everything that we look at which says that you can control it through your mobile is linked to each other. But that also brings out a significant threat. And if we overlay what we are doing as Digital India and our initiative to take really India to the next level and bring in the connectivity down to a grassroots level in our small towns and villages, the downside of that touches us very significantly if it is misused. Let me share with you some statistics from the Internet Security Threat Report from Symantec. 317 million malware variants globally, and 1 million new malware daily. Malware meaning things that are looking to do bad things to your devices. 1 million every day. Targeted attacks on critical infrastructure in financial sector, communication, transportation in India. This is not happening to the other guy. This is happening in India. And 60% of these attacks in India were on large enterprises. We are rated third in global threat, and 3.95% of malicious activity in the overall percentage is detected here in India. In social media scams, we have the dubious distinction of being number one in the APEC region and number two globally. When I got these statistics, I was actually a little amazed because I didn't realize the size of the problem of what is happening within the Indian world. We reported the third highest number of ransomware attacks in Asia, with over 60,000 attacks per year, 117 attacks per day, 7 attacks per hour. So while you're sitting here, someone in your family or friend circle, one of your loved ones' device is probably being attacked in the last 24 hours. So as a country, we, Hindu newspaper in 2013 spoke about what the surveillance was happening and how it was for political, strategic, commercial reasons, and how we didn't have an overall policy. And in 2013, we came up with a policy. The previous speaker spoke about some of the salient features of the policy. But again, within the four walls, a policy that promised a lot, spoke a lot, but frankly nothing much came out of it. And either because it had not been thought through well enough, or there were gaps in the thinking of what had to be implemented. The policy spoke about a workforce of 500,000 professionals over the next 5 years. And yeah, we have done very little to be able to implement it. Now the intention is all there. The government wants to do the right things, wants to create a policy and a framework. We saw what came out of the encryption policy draft that was put up by the government. Regretfully, rather than create a debate and fine-tune it, in 24 hours it was withdrawn. And therefore, to come up with a mechanism by which we will create a regulatory framework in our country has been a big challenge. And lo and behold, we have the lawmakers. Welcome, sir. I'm sorry you met so much traffic on your way here. We have Professor Rajiv Gowda, who's a member of parliament and plays an active role in lawmaking in the country. And we will try and deliberate a little on what are the challenges, what are the options. We also have the privilege of having Mr. Arvind Gupta, not wearing his entrepreneur hat right now. He's an entrepreneur with a lot to his credit, but he also plays a role as the head of the IT cell of BJP, the political party that is in power and plays a big role. I believe he has a big role to play in the Digital India framework that as a country that we are embarking on. So while the aspect is also what we are doing as Digital India, we will try and focus in this session a little on what are the challenges of the regulator and where we shall do it. I have requested, and Professor Gowda came a little late, maybe 5-7 minutes for each one of us to talk, and then we'll open it up to a discussion and questions, sir, if that's okay with you. So, Arvind, would you like to kick it off and take it? You can speak from there or here, either way, whatever works for you.
Is it okay if we sit and speak? Is that fine with everybody? Let me ask one question before we start. How many of you have ever used the torch or the flashlight application on your smartphone? The rest who don't are probably the most digitally savvy citizens that we have here. And I will comment on why I asked that question, but there's a reason I asked that. And those cyber geeks amongst us know why I have asked that question. But to start off from where Raman left, he said, I'm not wearing my entrepreneur hat today. I always comment on that once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You can't take that off. So the political journey for me also has been an entrepreneurial journey. 6 years ago when we started the technology and social media and digital, people used to laugh at us. And really, why I'm sharing that is because it was very entrepreneurial. I've been a NASSCOM member for 15 years, ran many companies, small and big, and upon my return from Silicon Valley, but the most difficult entrepreneurial journey I had was to sell the concept of digital and technology within a political setup from 2009 through 2015, which is 6 years. So, and it is very interesting today that from that time to the digital has become a primary thing. Professor Gowda, who's sitting on the esteemed panel with us, is, I think everybody, whether it's governance, political parties, campaigns, are using technology a lot more than they were using 5 to 6 years ago. As simple as that. 100 million new users have been added, internet users have been added in the last 12 to 15 months. Now, The first question, discussion point that was to be talked about was on this whole issue of digital India, the issue of data, security and privacy. And I think it's a very appropriate moment, because while we are producing tons and tons of digital citizens, digitally literate citizens, I think there is a huge issue around the data that we are producing and how companies actually unknowingly from the users, without the consent, actually there is an implicit consent, but without ethical consent, are actually using the data in multiple formats. And you know, India produces probably the biggest digital exhaust of any country in the world today. And if not today, we'll produce that a lot more. We have 300 million plus connected users today, so shortly going to become 500 million. 500 million bank accounts, mostly Aadhaar enabled. So we are moving to a world which is going to be a lot of cashless regime. If our colleagues, I'm taking a political thing, let us pass the GST bill. Transactions are going to be on the GST network, which is all very technology backed. And it is estimated today that more and more transactions, upwards of 3 to 4 billion transactions, consumer and government all including, will start happening on per month. 3 to 4 billion transactions per month will start happening on this huge transaction layer, payments layer, identity layer that the government is creating. And along with this, billions of other transactions that are already happening in the e-commerce and the travel bookings and the other consumer internet space. That is a huge digital exhaust. And while we are doing that, we don't know where all we are giving our data to who all we are giving our data to, who all is monetizing the data for what purposes. All these instant messengers, their business models to us are not clear, but they're very clear to themselves. That's why they are worth billions and billions of dollars. They are making money off the data that we are generating. The data is the new currency. And cyber sovereignty, along with that, is becoming the next key frontier. And in that thing, I'm linking that to that how 3 or 4 issues need to be done. One is, we need to make sure that, and that is part of the Digital India, is to make sure that the digitally literate citizens of India are getting education about their personal data protection. And that's part of the literacy program that we are embarking upon, number 1. 2, also how cyber security and data security needs to be managed both within government departments and at a national level. That is a key consideration today. While we have, and due credit to the UPA regime and the Congress who started this great Aadhaar scheme that we have inherited and actually taken forward. See, we do give credit to... I know, I want to applaud. So it is also one of the biggest technical challenges, because this is the biggest biometric database in the world today. Globally in the world today. It's the biggest biometric database. Now, it needs to be secure. And it needs to be protected by the state, by the government at its best. So, so that, and similarly all other related applications which use that, the data protection from a consumer perspective, from the government perspective, and thirdly from a national perspective. So 3 things are becoming top priority while we are embarking on this Digital India program. A renewed emphasis is being done on this as we speak. And now, the reason I asked you the question about the flashlight or the torch was this. There's a huge debate about the biometric data and how the right to privacy and how the government will use this data. I think that is a discussion that the merits of using Aadhaar-based systems outweigh any of the concerns that we may have. And while we may have the concerns, and we will continue to have the concerns, I just said that we need to protect it with our lives. We have to strengthen the systems. But that does not give us the reason to not use Aadhaar. We do need a privacy framework in this country. And there is a good debate that has already started on that. And what kind of consent network should be there to make sure that the data can be protected and the consumers, there is a transparency in who's accessing your data. But I don't think so. Aadhaar is really violating personal freedom, right, and all of that. Why I asked that, again, the torch and the flashlight question was, we actually end up giving a lot more data and private data to unknowing application makers. They have actually access to a lot more data about ourselves than Aadhaar will ever collect. And that's the point I want to make. And that's a very important point, that we debate Aadhaar 99.99%, but while giving access to some unscrupulous applications, we don't think even a second. And it's something very, very important to discuss.
Arvind, I'm interrupting, but I guess the issue that all of us would be concerned about, and you're right, they pick up more data. I mean, Google stores every search I do. The torch guy picked up a lot of data from me, etc. Today, we do not have a regulation in our country of what they will do with the data. Even if we for a moment say we trust the government will not misuse it, but ultimately there has to be a regulatory framework to be able to control it. So what are the challenges there? What are you seeing? Because you see a macro view, you see a view of digital India which is going to take giant strides, but this is the murkier side of digital India. And what are the challenges? I mean, I'm not saying we'll have solutions. If solutions were easy, we would have implemented it, but can we talk a little of the challenges there?
And I'm coming to that, Raman. We have, fortunately, a luxury of more time in the panel now, so if I can take a couple of more minutes to address that. The challenges here lie actually in defining that fine balance between what the consumer needs to do, what the country needs to do, and the security considerations also. You talked about the encryption policy. I think I'm not going to endorse the policy, but definitely we do need an encryption policy. What is that encryption policy? What should it be? What level of encryption? Who should have access to that data? The attacks in America and now recently in Paris have clearly shown that the fine balance between personal information and the encryption of that information versus what should be accessible to the government is to be defined, I think, and that's becoming more and more important. But we should not, the policy should be there, because in the absence of policy, you don't know what is happening. So a policy framework will ensure that there's a fair amount of process and the transparency, if you can, around what the state is doing, and what the citizens should be doing. But so we do need an encryption policy. We do need I think the privacy guidelines, data protection guidelines, and it is a right and opportune moment. The challenges lie in balancing, as I said, the benefits and the issues. And I personally believe the benefits today outweigh 9:1 the concerns that we have. But unfortunately, the concerns by a few get amplified a lot more than anything else. But I think that debate is still open, and one needs to take it forward. Encryption also is important, privacy, data protection, all those things are key. So just to end there, I think the last thing I do want to address, I think on cyber sovereignty, cyber crime, and cyber attacks, I think India is really relooking its engagement on the cyber scenario globally. I think a lot of, we do need a lot of domestic products, but also a lot of capacity. And while we are dealing with at least a lot of non-state rogue actors as well as rogue nations, and cyber being the new frontier, I think it's very, very, very refreshing that the the world is today looking at India to lead in providing the cyber leadership that is required. Because generally we are we are perceived diplomatically as a non-threatening state in that sense. So I think that's a very refreshing thing, and there's a renewed focus on that, which is very, very refreshing. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
We'll come back with the question, Professor.
Thanks, Raman. Thanks, Arvind. Let me just start with a couple of questions again to engage all of you. How many of you received emails from government officers from a Gmail or Yahoo ID? Okay. So that is the same government that we expect to protect our data, to ensure that official correspondence and everything will be encrypted, secured, whatever else. Okay. We may get there, but at this moment, we certainly aren't there. Second question, if you are in a different place and you want to make use of the free Wi-Fi, how much information are you going to put in there, and how easily are you going to sort of click on the, I agree to the terms and conditions, whatever they may be, right? Let me ask the question better. When asked, do you agree with the terms and conditions, how many of you take more than 1 second to click on that? Most of us will click on our terms and conditions without ever paying attention to what they mean. Even when we are downloading software, when we are signing up for Wi-Fi. So even if we build in protections, right, and say you need consent, well, we just are going to click that button come what may. Right? I mean, this is just telling you a couple of the practical difficulties. Another practical difficulty in the context of lawmaking, when it comes to an environment where technology is changing, where Facebook and things like that, where people share information so freely and abundantly, the concept itself was not there, say, 15 years ago, right? And so technology is moving forward. You're creating virtual worlds. People are participating in that and sharing so much. And where is this data housed? Who owns this data? As I think Arvind also alluded, it may be with Facebook, some more data may be with Google, none of which are actually, companies that, Sundar Pichai is here, you can't hold him hostage and say, hey, boss, sign here and make sure that we have access to everything that, everything that you need to, that we need to ensure privacy for our citizens. Now, so when you talk about lawmaking not keeping pace, see, you remember Section 66A, right? Much derided because it was misused. But if you actually look at the origin of that law, there was a lot of spamming, and people said we need something to counter spam, and so they went to the UK law on that front, and we said, okay, this seems to be working in the UK, so they sort of transplanted it and applied it here, and so it's about persistent harassment and things of that sort. So that's what the language of that law was. How it was implemented and interpreted by the lawmaking authorities was something totally different. So again, when you come up with good lawmaking on this, and try to find this very delicate balance which Arvind alluded to between security and privacy, how will the interpreters and the implementers of that law actually figure out what that means, and how will they apply it in particular context? That again is something that a lot more thought needs to go into. Now, these are just sort of early, observations, and don't look at your watch. I'm not taking that much time. At least
I have to do my job as a moderator. That is all.
At least
I'm not trying to
you
point
still have a
at
watch. What is a watch? My children will ask me. But anyway, the point is, there are some big domains into which the government is trying to go. For example, this whole DNA profiling, right? So at one level, this whole notion that people's, this is about as private, the data as you can get, should be sitting in some data bank accessible for potentially forensic purposes, right? You commit a crime and your DNA is there, then they'll be able to hone in on you, right? But that's one of the original logics for that, that particular DNA profiling bill. But where else can this data data go? Would it end up in the hands of insurance companies who say, okay, these are people we will not insure? Will this get sold to somebody else who will then target you for one thing or the other? I mean, so the complexities in these contexts are enormous. And when DNA in this whole human genome project was going on in the early days in the US, along with the scientific research, they had a separate research agenda called ethical, social, legal dimensions of the human genome project. Right from the beginning, they were thinking through many of these dimensions, and we need to go out and see what, what kind of ideas that they've come up with, which would be relevant in the Indian context. There's some other issues. See, we are moving towards a cashless economy. Aadhaar, direct benefit transfer, all these things will actually not just bring large numbers of excluded people into the financial net, bring a large section of the informal economy into the formal economy. It will also speed up the pace of transactions, give a tremendous boost to economic growth. The GDP growth rates that we're seeing today will be a pale shadow compared to what is possible if we really implement this kind of digital infrastructure and connect everybody to that. And our tax collections will go up and numerous other benefits will happen. But at the same time, how are we going to be sure that that infrastructure is secure, right? And because if there are even one or two failures, people will say, sorry, I'm going to go back to cash. I'm going to go back. I'll opt out of the system somehow, right? And the Supreme Court keeps saying, no, you can't make these things mandatory. Anyway, we are at a point in time where there is a whole generation of people coming up who are digital natives, mobile natives, and who would expect to have solutions in their hands that they assume that the lawmaking entities would have put in the protections so that they can use these technologies freely without worry that something could go wrong. That's a tremendous challenge and a burden that we face. We need ideas and we need engagement with these kinds of issues. So that's one of the reasons I'm really glad to be here and discussing these issues. Hardly saying that I'm some mega expert or anything like that, but we're interested in in drawing upon ideas that you all have to strengthen the systems that we have in place, the laws that we have in place, etc. The last point is, is the Indian context of privacy somewhat different, right? Everyone pokes into everyone else's business here. In the US, if you are, people would look very harshly at you if you ask them for their salaries or any what information that they consider to be private and personal. And here, I came back after about 16, 17 years in the US and joined the IIM Bangalore as a professor. And one of my colleagues, when I first met him, asked me, where do you live? And I told him Baswangudi in Bangalore. And the second question was, own home, huh? Yes. So do you own the home? So this is hardly the first or second question that somebody should be asking a perfect stranger. But, that was the kind of question that assumed that I'd be very happy to share a lot more details, just like we do when we are traveling in a long railway journey, right? With perfect strangers, we share a lot of information. So what is the context? How much are we willing to, should we apply Western notions of what is private and what is not? Should we apply even stricter notions in the Indian context, knowing that people tend to be a little more lax with how they share information for their good and their protection? These are some of the questions that we're wrestling with. I'll stop here before Raman looks at his watch again.
No. Okay, before we open up, there is, let me use some of the points both of you made and use the encryption policy and what happened. The need for that, I guess, and Arvind, you made the point, it's undeniable that we need a policy, a regulation, by whatever name called, whether we call it a bill passed by Parliament or a policy framework, etc. And what we've learnt is we are where we are as a country, as a nation, and putting something up for public debate, as we saw in the encryption policy, rather than have a debate and say, here are the alternatives, here is another way to look at it, uproar was created, and sadly we had to withdraw it. Now, whichever way the government acts, the government acts. The point that I have for both of you is, how can we create a public debate? Other than forums such as this, what is the way we can have a debate so that, you know, there is a lot of knowledge that is sitting there. If I look at the ethical hacking, and just as an example, or the, the capability of non-formally educated people to be able to hack, just the interest, because the Indian mind is capable of that. There is a huge capability that is sitting in this country. And that capability can help us, guide us towards creating a policy that is more robust. But our ability to create an open debate and the government operating in secrecy because there is no open debate creates an issue. So is there any chance we can create a public debate? How should we tackle it?
Let me just jump in here. Typically, governments nowadays have started having consultations. Many times they don't create a big enough window of time for consultations, but they say, here is a draft policy, or we call for inputs on these kinds of issues. So in various domains they've started doing that, but maybe this process also needs to be improved, in multifaceted ways, not just by engaging with groups like this, but by having the government. See, quite often I've seen some of these consultations, for example, when the government wants to check out BT brinjal or something like that, you suddenly have very, very hostile consultations, yes. And that doesn't really help. On some other issues, the last tourism policy, the window was like 10 days or something like that. Before you find out that the consultation is open, the window is over. So in some ways we have to worry about namkavaste attempts like that. But I'm sure Arvind can certainly influence the current government, and I can, of course, make a noise about it to ensure that the window is much larger and wider. But well, go ahead if you want to speak about this. I want to pick up on some other thread that you brought. Sure.
But this is a very interesting point. See, the encryption policy is a very classic case in, as an example, is that it came out as a draft. It was meant for public consultation.
Exactly.
And the amount of misinformation campaign and a misreporting that was done on that, as if that has become policy, was amazing. And without any due public feedback and consultations, it had to be abruptly withdrawn within 24 hours. Now, as I said, I don't endorse what was written there because but it should have been debated. And today
we are not discussing that aspect, the political aspect.
The debate is, I think, very necessary. So, things like MyGov platforms that have been created by the government, I think should be used a lot more actively to debate such public policy documents. Sometimes I find Twitter is not the place to debate them. And I think
140 characters may not be enough.
Yeah, so it's better to take them to
enough mud in 140 characters.
So, no, I think that there is too many issues there. So I think something like a MyGov and should be used a lot of proactively to do that, and it's already being done. A lot of non-data and technology-related policies are being actually debated and discussed there on HR, on HRD, on railways, women and child development. So it's being used very actively, but I guess a lot more.
Sure, but if you recall, on net neutrality, they had a consultation, and then for whatever reason, they put out everybody's email IDs and all sorts of other information that come to this. Come to the same issue of privacy. Why should all that data have been released? So the government's got a lot of work ahead before it sort of fine-tunes how it deals with this issue. But the fact that there is progress is certainly there.
And I think that is precisely the point. I think a lot of education internally is being done and should be done a lot more. The TRI was another very good example where a lot of public consultation was done. So many views were taken before any policy could be implemented, or even a report. TRI is a recommendatory body, so they were making a recommendation, and they have given, you know, a renewed consultation paper out for data pricing. But in that instance, I think one view was, and that, you know, anything that is submitted as a government to be transparent, you have to disclose who has done that. But on the other hand, my personal view on that is, you know, you could always put asterisks to a few things so that it cannot be spammed. So, point well taken, I think.
You said you wanted to pick up another.
Yeah, you were talking about the talent in our country, which, I mean, of course, we have lots of fantastic brains here, but in the larger context of cyber security, whether it's hacking, and, you know, in these sorts of domains, do we have that talent? Are there enough people who are who we can attract to, say, government, to you know, these are people which very, very special characteristics. They would need a very different cadre. They'd need very different incentives to come and work. So where are they? And are we putting in any effort to try and attract people in this direction? That's what my counter question to you.
So we might end up derailing this debate, but I can't let that go unanswered. So there are two aspects I'd like to bring out on. I think the raw material we have, the molten wax that is sitting there as our talent, is tremendous and humongous. And as a person who played a role on the BPO industry, we did a lot of work that had never been done in India before, and we were able to train people. But to bring out in perspective, let me, without naming the company, let me talk to you about what the chairman and CEO of a Fortune 5 company told me. This is a company for whom I had done a lot of work, bringing a lot of work of that company to India. And in a meeting about 1.5 years ago, he told me that India was great, and we were having a breakfast meeting, and I told him, yes, I'm glad we've done a lot of things. He says, but that is the problem. So what do you mean that is the problem? He's a financial services company CEO, and he says the quality of the fraud that we see coming out of India is unparalleled anywhere in the world. And that is employee fraud, where the employee understands the financial systems, and fraud occurs everywhere. Fraud is in the credit card world, fraud is a $4 billion business. But the chairman and CEO of a Fortune 5 company is saying that the Indian mind, when it decides to go on a parallel track, can be a big problem. And yeah, we are using Indians to fight the Indian fraud, but it is the single biggest problem we have out of India. That shows that, well, it's bad talent, but it is still talent. Whether it is ethical hacking or unethical hacking, shame on us if we cannot harness that talent. And that is a challenge, but as I said, that will take us in a different direction. We still have some time for questions. If anybody wants to, if you'll, sir, there should be mics there. If you'll go, oh, that mic is not there. There's a mic here, sir. If you'll come here and ask the question, please identify yourself and the specific question you have. We'll have time for 2-3 questions if.
Hi, my name is Aman, and I'm working with Adobe Systems. So my question is, like, as you are saying, at times when we bring up any initiative, there is a lot of misguidance that goes into the public, and there is an uproar, and then we have to take a step back. So my question is, like, when we know that this kind of a situation will prevail, we have many negative sentiments working against us, be it within the parliament, be it in the media, or be it in the public. Then why don't the government emphasize or bring up more clarity before bringing up any such legislative or any such bill or any such guideline? For example, like, we do have a one-page advertisement in a newspaper for a rally or for putting a stone for any milestone or for any kind of project. But when we are bringing this kind of initiative, or when we know, like if we take a vision of our PM, like with Digital India, where we are trying to reach, why don't we publicize that in public, or why don't we give them information like this is what we are planning and these are the benefits that you will be getting. So if people are aware of the benefits that they are getting out of those policies or guidelines,
I guess, Arvind, the
definitely
question
they will
is,
support it.
is there a opportunity to up the communication capabilities and bring that out?
Yeah, so I think, and I think Professor Gowda will can also answer that. But mostly, any consultation that is done is also advertised in newspapers, if that's the point you're trying to make.
But that's not done.
But let me also give you a very frank and fair opinion on this. The unless it's a big public cause, net neutrality was an exception where you had 1 million people right there, or that also because there's a lot of campaign that people did.
That was motivated.
It was all a campaign, but in some of the really genuine discussions, those newspaper ads, to me, don't get any ROI. Those that the comments that come are a few people who are interested in that. They write an email, they do, and the emails are generally those. Now they're changing a lot. I personally have advocated for removing those Gmails and Hotmails from the government system, but you generally email responses and people do that, but you get a few hundreds of those. How do you make it a lot more? And that was one of the things that was tried with the encryption thing, was to put out the policy in social media so that people can respond to that. I think I think we have to see what is the best way to do that. The experience with inscription was not very fruitful.
Yeah,
So
it's not just with this encryption.
So
but
we can have a dialogue post that. Any other question? Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm an information security manager in the government. Normally, I should not be speaking in this such forum, but I couldn't help asking you something. As you have already said that technology is a very dynamic environment, and so the policy making in the technology world should also be very dynamic. What I find is that sometimes the policy making dialogue is hijacked by the media, and people debate ad nauseum on the channels, increasing their TRPs and all that, and nothing happens. But should it not be a sort of a policy again that when a new technology or a new threat or a new idea is for which a policy is to be made, is promoted or floated, there should be a time limit within which the committee should give a report, then it should be debated, and then there should be at least some policy on the table, because world is moving on, and threats keep on happening, frauds keep on happening, and we do not have a policy. So, and for us managers, it is a very difficult.
Professor Gowda make that point to say that there needs to be an appropriate window. A 10-day window, which is the time-bound aspect, may not be adequate, but it cannot be 2 years either. So I guess we have a lot of learning to do. That is what we are trying to bring out, to say there is desire for public debate. That is what I'm hearing from both the esteemed panelists. There is a desire for debate, but we have a lot to learn how to do that debate, how to get the input, to have it to be worthwhile. So, and if we respect that there is learning to be done, that is a good step forward on that. I see you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that parliamentary committees, right? The work that we do in parliamentary committees is not visible to the world, so we get a bad rap as MPs disrupting and things like that, which is exactly what I was doing and what delayed me here. But the point is, committees, though, do put in a huge amount of effort to try and get in inputs when they're considering various bills and policies and regulations. So in that sense, also, there are multiple efforts. How quickly that can be done is a trickier issue, because it gets caught up in parliamentary procedures and maneuvers and things like that. And, but there is that process as well. right? And so some of it can be done by government officials, because a lot of it can be done in the executive itself, and some which requires legislative sanction will require Parliament to come on board. But there are enough people across party lines who are interested in improving this. Okay, that much I can assure you.
So I see you move there to the mic.
Yeah,
We'll take that as a last question, so we are a little
Thank you.
short of time.
It's a general public question. Now the program is for promoting data protection, but I am asking to provide data. It's like this. We have multiple governments, departments, and we have multiple, as you told, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and so many committees. But there is no system, because here opposition and government both are sitting, and I am general public, I am asking you a simple question. Creating data and then protection. That there is no synchronization. A general public, when he wants to know data of the government, happenings of the government, there is no data at a common point. Like when we are in this hotel, we have 5 lifts, 5 elevators, but we have a one button, and we get either of the elevator at a time. And it makes sense that whatsoever government policy is happening, it becomes common, available at one portal. Like Aadhaar you are talking, I am talking of a single point where everything is available. Only thing is, in the subject they have to write the particular government or department name. Any government...
Sir, I think...
I will, one minute, it's a very important. It's not question, it's a policy subject. It's not necessary to be replied now. It is to be brought in the ears of the government as well as the opposition. So whatsoever is happening has to be brought on 2 common portals, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and the government. This is my question cum suggestion. That's it.
Thank you, sir.
Sure, just very quickly, different states, for example, have been proactively putting out information. We are in an era where proactive disclosure of data seems to be the larger norm. On the other hand, I've encountered situations where, for example, in Bangalore, there's an activist who helps clean up electoral rolls. And now the Election Commission in Karnataka has chosen to put everything in a format that he can't mine anymore, to identify all the flaws in the, because they find it as if, find him criticizing them all the time, pointing out the flaws. So as a defensive mechanism, they've managed to come up with the exact opposite, which doesn't serve the larger purpose. But, I'm sure Arvind has the ears of the most powerful people in the country, and they will announce the big data portal in the next Independence Day address.
No, I think also on the data, in fairness, while it is not proactively available in terms of reactive availability, RTI is a very unique regulation, and the ability of us as citizens to be able to ask the government for that data. The point you're making is it should be proactively available, and I guess what I'm hearing Professor Gowda say is there is a move in that direction. There are some, maybe this Karnataka example is not a huge step in that direction, but that is where we are going. So, there is a lot of distance that can be covered. There's a lot of learning that has to be done. One last question from somebody. Okay, if the lady wants to ask a question, who am I to say no? I'll get beaten up, but that's nothing.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So there were a number of tracks that were conducted in the
Ma'am, if you just move the mic nearer to you, just
a number of tracks that were conducted in the past 2 days, and one of them which I attended was with regards to CERT's initiatives on protecting the complete national security. So while it is very apparent that a lot of work has gone into creating that the CERT infrastructure, and a lot of good work has really happened at the government level, we don't expect that it will change overnight. But while there is so much of repository lying in at the CERT level, can we see that repository being shared to the larger fraternity to actually equip themselves proactively?
See, I think that's a very counterproductive thing. It's a security asset. I personally believe, can't speak for what CERT wants to do, But in my personal opinion, if it's a data that the CERT is holding because of certain reasons, then and it should be held within CERT. It should not be counterproductive. But really, depending on what discussion you have had, if there is data which has public utility, it should be made public. If there, but that's a decision CERT needs to make. I really don't know what. Yeah. So share it with interested parties. So exactly. So yeah. So I think that's the answer right there.
Okay, the debate will continue, and we will use this forum and other forums for the debate. Just last year, in terms of the government, just last year 150 .gov and .nic domains were hacked. There is a need perhaps of some expert panels or to identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, whatever, whichever way we look at it. Perhaps a private-public partnership. As a country, we've not had the financial wherewithal and the time to secure the data and create the cyber security. But if Digital India and Smart City initiatives are anything to go by, the cyber infrastructure being fully secured is not optional. It is hygiene and it is a requirement. With that, I'd like to thank my panelists. Thank you, sir, very much. We are a little ahead of time, but hey, you got some pearls of wisdom from the panelists. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, folks.